America's oldest mystery, the disappearance of over 100 English settlers from Roanoke Island.
This is one of America's oldest unsolved mysteries, and it happened in our own backyard. What happened to the lost colony of Roanoke?
The name Roanoke Colony has always carried with it the sense of something unfinished, something broken off mid-story, a beginning without an end. For centuries, historians, archaeologists, and storytellers have wrestled with the disappearance of over 100 settlers who vanished from Roanoke Island in the late 16th century. The only trace left behind was a single word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. This was not enough to provide clarity, and so generations spun theories about massacre, starvation, integration with local tribes, or even something more otherworldly. For a long time, the truth seemed locked behind a wall of time, impervious to the tools available to human hands. Yet now, through the combined might of artificial intelligence and the mass of historical data finally made machine-readable, the enigma has cracked. The revelation, startling in its clarity, has swept through the world with the force of a shockwave, transforming what was once legend into something unnervingly real. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The process that brought the truth to light was unlike any other. For decades, fragments of journals, letters, Spanish and English intelligence reports, and obscure references buried in libraries across Europe and the Americas lay scattered like unassembled pieces of a puzzle. Human historians had pieced together many of these scraps before, but connections often slipped through fingers because no individual mind could hold the vast network of nuance and contradiction all at once. When AI was unleashed on this problem, it was as though a torch was brought into a chamber that had remained in darkness for 4 centuries. Machine learning models scoured linguistic patterns, examined cross-referenced accounts, tracked genealogical data, and even reconstructed lost voices from partial transcriptions. The gaps began to close, the silences began to speak, and what emerged was a story hidden in plain sight. At the heart of the discovery was the realization that the settlers had not simply vanished, they had made a choice. AI uncovered letters long overlooked in Spanish archives that described English settlers moving inland, aligning themselves with native groups in ways that were both cooperative and fraught. One piece of documentation hinted at clandestine alliances and desperate bargains, while another suggested the colonists deliberately concealed their trail to evade Spanish ships patrolling the Atlantic coast. The word Croatoan, long thought to be a marker of migration to a nearby island, was revealed to be something deeper, a code, a reference understood within a specific context of indigenous European exchange. AI exposed the layered meaning behind the word, showing it was less a destination and more a signpost for kinship, integration, and survival. The implications of this go beyond a mystery solved. For centuries, the dominant narrative had painted the Roanoke settlers as tragic figures, either slaughtered by hostile forces or erased by the wilderness. What AI revealed instead was a tale of adaptation and cultural blending, one where survival did not mean the colony's annihilation, but its transformation. This shift upends the foundation of how early American history has been taught. The story was never of loss alone, it was of reinvention. It forces a re-examination of where the roots of American identity truly begin. In spaces where cultures did not merely clash, but interwove in ways both subtle and enduring. The shock spreading across the world is not simply from the details of what happened, but from what this means about the fragility of historical memory. For generations, people built careers, textbooks, and national myths around the mystery of Roanoke. The vanished colony became a metaphor for lost innocence, the dangers of ambition, or the unknowable void of the New World. To learn that the truth was neither mystical disappearance nor unresolvable tragedy, but a deliberate act of survival reframes centuries of myth-making. It shows how easily absence can be turned into legend, and how legend can harden into supposed truth. AI has demonstrated that history is not only shaped by what survives, but also by what is ignored or hidden, waiting for tools sophisticated enough to read it. The sheer precision of the AI analysis was part of the astonishment. It was not only written records that told the tale, but also material fragments. Patterns in carbon-dated pottery shards matched with records of trade goods listed in English inventories. Genealogical analysis, run across DNA databases and indigenous oral traditions, that were digitally transcribed suggested lineages that carried English bloodlines far inland, undetectable until the computational weight of AI made correlations visible. What had seemed anecdotal, the occasional claim of European features among tribes in subsequent centuries, suddenly gained a concrete backbone. The settlers had not disappeared into oblivion. They had become threads in a tapestry that remained unrecognized for centuries. For many, the shock is existential. The mystery of Roanoke has long stood as one of history's alluring voids, a reminder that not all questions yield answers. Now that it has been illuminated, it reminds the world that there are few true enigmas that cannot be touched by technology. The human imagination may yearn for mysteries to remain intact, but AI has shown that the curtain of time can be pierced. This brings both wonder and unease. If the past can be unraveled with such clarity, what of other cherished legends? What of mysteries that define cultures, religions, and nations? The revelation at Roanoke is not just about a colony, but about the future of knowledge itself. The global reaction underscores how deeply people had invested in the unknowability of Roanoke. Scholars who built careers around speculation now find themselves standing on overturned ground. Writers and artists who use the disappearance as metaphor must contend with a reality less enigmatic, but perhaps more profound. The public, long enchanted by the idea of settlers vanishing into thin air, now must imagine them not as lost ghosts, but as living, breathing people who chose survival over adherence to the plan of empire. That shift is jarring. The vanished are no longer symbols, but agents of their own fate, and that is a truth as unsettling as it is inspiring. The weight of this discovery also alters perceptions of the relationship between colonists and indigenous peoples. For too long, history has leaned on simplistic binaries of conquest and destruction. The AI revelation shows that, at least in this instance, survival necessitated trust, learning, and integration. It complicates narratives of hostility and replaces them with stories of negotiation and compromise. That does not mean peace was permanent or perfect, but it suggests that the roots of American history are bound up in cross-cultural unions that were long erased from the dominant record. This reframing forces societies to reckon with uncomfortable truths about the origins of nations and the selective memory that shaped identity. In many ways, the shock arises because the revelation strips away centuries of projection. The colonists were not mysterious martyrs of empire. They were pragmatic, desperate, and willing to bend in order to live. This makes them more human than the legend ever allowed. Instead of phantoms swallowed by history, they are survivors whose choice was to blend rather than vanish. That human detail, messy, imperfect, practical, is precisely what generations of myth had suppressed. AI's intervention has returned humanity to a story that had been too long consumed by speculation. What makes the world real, however, is not only the truth itself, but the method by which it was found. The Roanoke mystery was not solved by a lone genius, but by machines capable of absorbing the detritus of history and weaving it into coherent narrative. This demonstrates a turning point in how humanity relates to its own past. No archive, however obscure, is safe from the reach of technology. No fragment is too minor to be ignored. AI has shown that the story of history is not fixed but alive, capable of being rewritten as new tools allow us to hear the whispers left in its margins. The global shock, then, is layered. It is the shock of losing a mystery. It is the shock of confronting a new truth about cultural origins. It is the shock of realizing how vulnerable myths are when exposed to technology's gaze. And it is the shock of recognizing that this is only the beginning. If Roanoke can be laid bare, what else will follow? The questions ripple outward, unsettling and exhilarating at once. The Roanoke revelation speaks not only to the past, but to the nature of human curiosity itself. Mysteries draw people because they promise the unknown, and the unknown is fertile ground for imagination. Now that AI has shifted the ground, there is unease about what will be lost as mysteries collapse under the weight of computation. Yet there is also the recognition that truth, however disruptive, carries its own kind of wonder. The colonists' fate, once cloaked in darkness, now emerges as a story of resilience, of cultural entanglement, and of human will to survive at any cost. That story may lack the spectral thrill of disappearance, but it contains something even more compelling: the proof that humanity endures in ways both unexpected and transformative. And so, as the world reels from the revelation, it is not simply because a mystery has been solved. It is because this mystery was never just about a colony. It was about the boundaries of knowledge, the fragility of history, and the collision between myth and fact. AI has not merely revealed what happened at Roanoke, it has revealed the shifting nature of truth itself. The settlers are no longer shadows. They are part of a story that belongs to both the past and the present. A reminder that even in disappearance, humanity leaves traces that can, in time, be found. The revelation that artificial intelligence has laid bare the truth behind the disappearance of the Roanoke colony has not only solved a centuries-old historical puzzle, but has unleashed an entirely new chapter in the way people perceive knowledge, culture, and the human story itself. For generations, the lost colony was synonymous with absence and speculation. Now, with clarity cutting through myth, humanity faces the full weight of implications that are as vast as they are unsettling. What is striking is not just that the enigma is no longer a blank space on the map of history, but that its unraveling has exposed layers of consequence that ripple outward into nearly every facet of thought, from anthropology to politics, from technology to collective memory. The most immediate wave of astonishment comes from the recognition that so much of what was once considered untraceable has now become accessible. When AI linked the fragmentary evidence into a coherent narrative, it underscored how fragile the very fabric of lost history really is. In a world where algorithms can reconstruct connections invisible to the human eye, there is a dawning awareness that almost nothing can remain permanently obscured. This changes how societies view archives, oral traditions, and even casual artifacts. What once seemed trivial, a half-erased ledger entry, a neglected report in a foreign archive, a mismatched pottery shard, suddenly becomes a vital thread in an immense web of meaning. The Roanoke truth has demonstrated that history's silences are often less about absence and more about waiting for the right instrument to make them speak. This realization shakes the foundation of historical disciplines. Entire fields were built on the notion that many gaps in the record are eternal, that certain mysteries would forever resist explanation. With Roanoke dismantled as an enigma, scholars now grapple with the possibility that their disciplines will be forced into a new era, one where AI does not simply assist but leads the way in uncovering truths. Universities and research institutions are already reevaluating their priorities, sensing that the model of lone researchers painstakingly sifting through dusty archives will increasingly be overshadowed by collaborative systems between human curiosity and machine capacity. What this means for the next generation of historians is staggering. The discipline itself is undergoing a paradigm shift, as students are taught not only to read documents, but to interrogate datasets on a scale never before imagined. The psychological shock of this is profound. People have always cherished mysteries, not only because of curiosity, but because of what those mysteries symbolized. Roanoke, in particular, was woven into the mythic imagination of entire nations. It symbolized the danger of ambition, the fragility of colonization, and the haunting uncertainty of the past. That myth, however, has now been replaced with something less ghostly but far more real, a tale of survival, integration, and human adaptability. This narrative is richer and arguably more inspiring, but it demands a recalibration of cultural identity. When children learn about the founding moments of the Americas, they will no longer be told of a colony that disappeared without a trace. Instead, they will be taught of a colony that endured by bending, that preserved life by blurring cultural boundaries. That retelling may be empowering, but it also strips away the romance of disappearance that fueled literature, folklore, and art for centuries. The global impact extends far beyond the borders of the United States. Roanoke was a Western myth, but its solving resonates across cultures because it embodies a universal pattern, the fascination with lost peoples and places. Every civilization holds its own Roanokes, stories of vanished settlements, unexplained migrations, or forgotten dynasties. The realization that AI can untangle even the most stubborn of these has sparked a worldwide reevaluation of historical mysteries. From the disappearance of entire cities in Central Asia to the fading of minor dynasties in Africa, researchers now look at their own enigmas with new eyes, wondering which will fall next under the machine's gaze. The psychological shock felt globally stems not from Roanoke itself, but from the recognition that the tools of unraveling are now universally applicable. The age of permanent mystery is coming to an end. Yet the revelation also raises ethical questions. If AI can strip away the veil of the unknown, what happens when certain mysteries serve as cultural anchors for communities? The Lost Colony was an American story, but countless indigenous tribes also held their own oral traditions that touched upon it. Now, with AI confirming integration between settlers and native groups, those oral traditions are validated in ways both empowering and unsettling. Communities that long held whispers of such integration can point to AI's conclusions as evidence of their ancestral memory's accuracy. At the same time, their stories are now absorbed into a global narrative framed by technology rather than by the community itself. The balance between empowerment and appropriation becomes delicate, as indigenous voices that preserve fragments of the truth are overshadowed by the grandeur of AI's revelation. This tension brings into focus a larger implication: the power dynamics of knowledge. For centuries, history was written by empires, nations, and scholars with access to records and authority. Now, with AI capable of pulling from countless sources simultaneously, the monopoly over narrative control is broken. Yet paradoxically, power is also concentrated in new ways. The systems that solved Roanoke are not in every household. They are controlled by institutions, corporations, and governments with the resources to run them. The public marvels at the truth revealed, but beneath the marvel lies unease. If the fate of Roanoke can be uncovered by AI, then the power to decide which mysteries to prioritize, which narratives to construct, and which silences to break rests in the hands of those who direct the machines. Knowledge becomes both more democratic in reach and more centralized in control, a paradox that defines this new age. For ordinary people, the revelation changes the relationship to the past on a deeply personal level. Mysteries like Roanoke offered room for imagination and speculation. Families told ghost stories, novelists built entire careers on fictionalized accounts, and schoolchildren speculated about what might have happened. Now, that imaginative freedom contracts under the weight of certainty. The human mind struggles when something it believed unknowable is suddenly made knowable because the unknown had provided a space of creative refuge. The public shock is, in part, a mourning for lost mystery. Yet alongside this grief emerges something equally powerful: awe at the resilience of those settlers. To imagine them not as victims swallowed by the wilderness, but as people who chose survival through integration reshapes not just their story, but the way people think about human tenacity in general. The consequences extend into politics and diplomacy as well. Narratives about colonial history are deeply tied to national identity, and the Roanoke mystery was no exception. With AI showing that colonists assimilated into native communities, nations must now revisit how they frame their origins. For the United States, which has long emphasized narratives of European persistence against overwhelming odds, the acknowledgement that survival was achieved through integration complicates the story of rugged independence. It suggests a beginning not of isolation but of entanglement. For England and Spain, the revelation shifts the context of imperial competition. Spanish documents, once overlooked, now play a central role in proving the settlers' movements. This forces a re-examination of the geopolitics of the era, revealing that much of the mystery was less about disappearance and more about secrecy in the shadow of empire. The technological dimension also demands attention. The AI that solved Roanoke did not rely on one simple algorithm, but a layered approach, combining natural language processing, genealogical modeling, image reconstruction, and cross-referencing with archaeological data. This demonstrates a milestone in computational history: the ability to unify disparate kinds of information into a single, coherent narrative. The shock here lies in the realization that such technology is not limited to history. If it can resolve a centuries-old disappearance, what might it reveal in criminal investigations, climate modeling, or genetic lineage mapping? The Roanoke breakthrough is both a historical revelation and a harbinger of the ways AI will disrupt countless fields beyond academia. The implications also touch upon philosophy. Human beings have long grappled with the question of whether truth is always desirable. In the case of Roanoke, the truth strips away a haunting myth but replaces it with a story of survival. Many find this inspiring, yet others feel robbed of the enigma that once fired their imagination. This sparks debates over whether every mystery should be solved. Do people lose something essential when they know too much? Is there a value to mystery that outweighs the satisfaction of certainty? The Roanoke case becomes a test for this broader question. Humanity is confronted with the paradox that while knowledge empowers, it also diminishes the spaces where imagination once thrived. The revelation also alters the role of storytelling. For centuries, writers, poets, and filmmakers filled the void of Roanoke with speculation. Their work shaped cultural imagination far more than any evidence could. Now, with AI offering a definitive narrative, the nature of storytelling shifts. Fiction will no longer dwell on the colonists vanishing without trace, but on the struggles of survival, the blending of cultures, and the quiet choices of adaptation. The mystery once inspired tales of horror and loss. The truth now invites stories of endurance, resilience, and hybridity. The shock lies in the pivot itself. Cultural production must reimagine what it means to tell the tale of Roanoke in the light of certainty. The effects on education will be equally transformative. Generations of students learned about the lost colony as an example of history's enduring puzzles. Teachers used it to ignite curiosity, encouraging students to think critically about what might have happened. With the puzzle solved, educators face a challenge: how to harness the same sense of curiosity in an era where mysteries may increasingly fall to AI. The answer may lie in shifting the focus from what is unknown to how the unknown is made known. The process of AI reconstruction itself may become the new source of wonder, teaching students not about absence, but about the extraordinary ways knowledge can be retrieved. The broader cultural shock, then, is multi-layered. It is the shock of losing an enigma, the shock of discovering resilience in unexpected forms, the shock of technology rewriting history, and the shock of facing the consequences of certainty. Each layer reverberates differently through different communities. For some, it is liberation, a vindication of long-held oral traditions. For others, it is disorientation, the loss of a cultural anchor. For all, it is a reminder that the past is not static but alive, waiting for tools powerful enough to interpret it. The Roanoke revelation will be remembered not merely as the solving of a mystery, but as the moment when the relationship between humanity and its past irrevocably changed. The settlers, once phantoms of speculation, are now figures of flesh and choice, revealed not by chance but by technology. The world reels because this single event foreshadows a new age, one where no mystery is beyond reach, one where history can be rewritten not by victors but by machines that see what human eyes cannot. It is this vision of the future, born from the revelation of the past, that truly leaves the world in shock. The unmasking of the Roanoke colony's fate through artificial intelligence has sparked an unrelenting tide of reflection across every imaginable field. The moment cannot be reduced to a single historical event solved, because what truly grips the world is the realization that the conditions that allowed a mystery to persist for over 4 centuries are dissolving in real time. When AI untangled the web of Roanoke's disappearance, it created a precedent that now hangs over every unresolved story of human history. And this precedent is reshaping disciplines, identities, and even how people perceive themselves in relation to time. One of the most immediate transformations is within archaeology. Traditionally, excavations were laborious, often producing more questions than answers. A fragment of a bowl, a half-rotted wooden structure, or a scatter of beads could only be understood through comparative interpretation. Now, in the aftermath of the Roanoke revelation, AI's capacity to correlate such fragments with massive digital archives means that the smallest artifact can unlock entire stories. A shard of pottery from a riverbank can now be digitally compared against inventories, trade records, shipping manifests, and indigenous craftsmanship databases simultaneously. The Roanoke breakthrough demonstrated that such methods are not theoretical but transformative, offering archaeology a new identity as a discipline where every object may speak volumes. The effects ripple into anthropology as well. Roanoke's settlers were long seen as people who either vanished into nothingness or were obliterated by hostile forces. AI's reconstruction instead revealed them as cultural hybrids, weaving their fate into the fabric of indigenous life. For anthropologists, this forces a new interpretation of cultural identity, that it is not static, not bound by bloodlines or borders, but fluid, adaptive, and deeply entangled. The case highlights how cultures are never isolated. They are porous, merging in ways that traditional narratives often resist acknowledging. The disappearance of Roanoke was, in truth, the emergence of something new, a story of human survival not by force, but by integration. This has profound implications for indigenous communities themselves. For centuries, many native groups carried oral traditions suggesting that Europeans had joined them, married into their tribes, and left descendants. These traditions were dismissed by mainstream historians who demanded written proof. AI's revelation provides validation, showing that indigenous memory carried truths overlooked by European-centered history. The emotional weight of this validation cannot be overstated. It restores dignity to voices marginalized for centuries and rebalances the authority of whose account is considered legitimate. It is not just that Roanoke has been explained, it is that a wound inflicted by historical dismissal has been in part healed by recognition. But this validation comes with complexities. The authority of the revelation lies not in the voices of the tribes themselves, but in the technology that confirmed them. This raises uneasy questions about whether indigenous truth must always wait for technological or Western confirmation to be considered valid. The shock of the Roanoke case is thus twofold. It reveals a hidden truth, but it also exposes the imbalance of epistemic authority in the modern world. Communities may celebrate the recognition, yet they also wrestle with the reality that their stories only gain traction once machines confirm what they already knew. The global academic world now faces its own reckoning. Historical mysteries have long fueled conferences, academic rivalries, and entire careers. The allure of the unanswered drove research as much as the pursuit of answers. With AI proving its ability to collapse centuries-old enigmas, the question arises, what happens to scholarship when mystery itself is endangered? Roanoke is the first domino, but it will not be the last. Institutions will be compelled to redirect their focus, shifting from speculation about what happened to exploration of how AI reached its conclusions. Scholarship will evolve from reconstructing the past to critiquing the methods by which machines construct that past. The shock here is intellectual dislocation. Entire frameworks of research are being dismantled before scholars' eyes. The public imagination, too, undergoes seismic shifts. For centuries, stories of Roanoke captivated audiences precisely because they were unresolved. Novels, plays, and films leaned into the eerie silence, using the mystery as a canvas for fear, wonder, or national allegory. Now creators face a redefined narrative space. With the truth in hand, art will inevitably shift toward dramatizing the actual story of integration, survival, and cross-cultural blending. This offers rich new veins of creativity but eliminates the haunting openness that mystery once provided. The shock for audiences lies in this pivot, from suspense to certainty, from the spectral to the human. Cultural production will not wither but will transform, and in that transformation, people must confront how much of their imagination was built on the scaffolding of the unknown. The revelation also echoes through political consciousness. Roanoke was often taught as an example of colonial fragility, a prelude to later triumphs like Jamestown and Plymouth. Now, the idea that Roanoke settlers survived through indigenous support complicates narratives of European independence and supremacy. It places indigenous communities not at the margins, but at the center of early American survival. This reframing forces political leaders and institutions to reassess how they present national origin stories. What emerges is not a tale of pure European perseverance, but one of interdependence and shared resilience. Such a reframing unsettles nationalist myths, creating tension in societies that prefer simplified foundations. The shock of Roanoke lies not only in solving a mystery, but in destabilizing political narratives carefully cultivated for centuries. Beyond politics, the revelation sends ripples into philosophy and theology. Mysteries like Roanoke were often treated as metaphors for human limitations, reminders that not all things can be known. The collapse of the mystery forces thinkers to grapple with the diminishing space for the unknowable. If AI can expose truths hidden for centuries, then what does mystery mean in an age of relentless discovery? Theological perspectives that leaned on the unknowable as a space for faith must adapt, while philosophers wrestle with the ethical implications of a future where nothing can remain hidden. The shock here is existential. The line between the known and the unknowable has been redrawn by machines, altering the boundaries of human humility itself. Economics is not untouched by the revelation either. The tourism industry around Roanoke has thrived for years on the enigma of the lost colony. Festivals, reenactments, and attractions built their appeal on the haunting absence of answers. With the mystery solved, such industries face upheaval. They must reinvent themselves, pivoting from the allure of the lost to the drama of the found. This transition will require creativity, as the mystique that once drew crowds has evaporated under the light of certainty. The shock for communities economically tied to the legend is tangible, as livelihoods built on mystery must now adjust to storytelling grounded in fact. At the same time, the commercial world sees opportunity. The process by which AI solved Roanoke has demonstrated the immense value of historical reconstruction for tourism, entertainment, and education. Companies are already considering how to market AI-driven truth reconstructions for other mysteries. Imagine immersive experiences where visitors can walk through simulations of events reconstructed from fragments across centuries. The Roanoke revelation becomes not just a historical turning point, but the prototype for an entire industry of reconstructed pasts. The shock here lies in how quickly technology transforms not only understanding, but commodification. The educational implications extend further than classrooms. Museums, archives, and cultural centers now have a new mandate: to incorporate AI into their exhibitions. Where once displays emphasized fragments, replicas, or speculation, they can now offer immersive reconstructions grounded in AI analysis. Visitors will not only see artifacts, but experience the stories those artifacts tell when woven together by computation. The Roanoke revelation has inaugurated a new standard for public history, one where institutions must adopt advanced tools or risk irrelevance. The shock reverberates across these spaces as curators grapple with how to translate technological certainty into accessible narratives without losing the sense of wonder. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on AI uncovering the Roanoke colony truth? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.